Welcome to the Out of Darkness podcast, episode 14, Occultic Tennessee, part 5. An In Darkness, Into Light media production. Hey, what is going on, guys? As I said, welcome to the Out of Darkness show. I'm your host, Brent. This is the show where we discuss and talk about all things supernatural, paranormal, occultic, and strange phenomenon. But we have these conversations by analyzing them from the lens of scripture and using a biblical worldview. And once again, I have one of my closest brothers with me. Cleveland is back, guys. Cleveland is back.
Oh, man, it's been a minute, guys.
Yeah, it has. I mean, like, it's been what, maybe 2 months now?
2 months, yeah. There's a lot of things happen in 2 months.
Yeah, so part of the reason, so we're going to have two conversations. We promise we won't be as long on this one.
No, yeah. This is going to be yeah.
But so we kind of had a new revelation on some of the history here in Tennessee. It was accidental, actually.
Yeah.
Disclaimer. If you guys haven't been paying attention to our YouTube channel, go over there and check it out.
Right.
It's called Adventures with Brent and Lydia. And part of it's just a blog, or a vlog rather. And the other part is like we're starting to kind of delve into dissecting, if you will, some paranormal stuff.
Right.
And actually, like that was originally your idea, Cleveland, that we started doing that.
Yeah, man.
It was like he actually kind of requested it, and then it just kind of blossomed into what we're doing.
Right, exactly.
But this was so strange in a lot of ways because, like, I had told Cleveland, I'm like, hey, do you know about this thing that happened here in Clarksville? And he's like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And all I did is say the name.
Mm-hmm. And when he told me that, I was going like, okay, let me go check this out.
Right. So there was a murder / hanging. Mm-hmm. What was the year? It was like, what, 1890?
1891.
Something? Okay. Now, let me just give you the lead into this. So the reason why I was looking this stuff up was Lydia and I are trying to, so obviously, you know, if you guys don't know, like my wife has a lot of health challenges as well as me. I was recently diagnosed about 6 or 7 months ago with dystonia. I'm not going to really get into the whole thing right now, but I have uncontrollable muscle spasms in my neck and going into my hands and my arms. It just makes things a little bit more difficult.
Right.
So when we think about going to like a paranormal type of situation, we have to take that into consideration.
Right.
And one of the places that we were curious about is we want to come to the local stuff in Clarksville.
Exactly.
And I was kind of mind blown by this thing that we're about to talk about.
Right.
And then we're also going to talk about something else that we were talking about when we were just breaking bread at the table.
Right.
But this was crazy, guys. Like this was not planned. And when I brought it to his attention, he was baffled.
Yes.
Now, let me say something about Cleveland's personality here. It is very hard to baffle him when it comes to Tennessee history.
Right.
Only because he spent his whole life here.
Right.
He's a historian himself.
Right.
So when I gave him this information, neither one of us knew what to do with it.
Yeah, because I mean, when you told me, like,
so
what? Yeah.
let me give you the premise here. So
right.
I was looking for local places to kind of check out. Like I'm not by no means, guys, am I a paranormal investigator anymore? I'm just trying to understand the whole idea of this.
Right.
And because like coming from a Christian worldview, it's actually a little bit more challenging to really kind of understand this stuff.
Exactly.
Because, like, you know, we're not denying anything supernatural here. We're not saying that demons don't exist. What we're trying to do is actually understand.
Yes, that's really what the
point.
Know,
from a biblical standpoint.
Exactly.
So I found 5 different places locally, but there was 2 that stood out, and one of them I had no idea was even connected to something that we have already talked about.
Yes.
And the other one was such a mind blow for me anyway, because I wasn't expecting where the research was going to go.
Yeah.
So the first one, now you guys may or may not remember, we were talking about a boat going down to New Orleans.
Exactly.
And Cleveland kind of mentioned this in passing,
Right.
but I found out that the actual house that the captain was his house is one. Not only is it a museum now, which I had no idea,
Right. Yeah, I remember we talked about that. Right.
but it's supposedly haunted.
Yeah.
And so I approached him, several months ago at this point.
Right.
And we've talked about it here and there.
Right.
But this house is essentially like it's kind of like a landmark here in Clarksville.
Exactly.
And when I realized it was the same conversation we've had, I was just kind of blown away. Like I didn't even know how to react.
Yeah, until you gave me some more information.
Yeah, because like again, like this stuff is very it's not really easy to talk about here, and especially in this area of Tennessee. So that's the first one that we're going to kind of talk about, and then the second thing that we're going to talk about is just an absolute just craziness. So there was this. So for those of you that are familiar with the Clarksville area.
Oh,
there's multiple caves access.
Exactly.
So we've talked about that several times throughout all of Tennessee. The Mammoth Cave system basically runs through the whole entire state.
Exactly.
And we've talked about that multiple times. But finding a connection with something that happened in Memphis,
It's still
and here it's just when you guys hear this story, okay, because Cleveland had to do some digging for this one.
Yeah, it took me a while because when Brent gave me this, when he told me about what happened, first it started with the boat.
Right.
You know, going from New Orleans to Clarksville, well, actually Memphis, then Clarksville, because you got to think about it. The boat is a steamboat, and this boat coming from New Orleans to Memphis all the time.
Right.
This is like one of these places that one of the levees over there is that this boat has a prominent people coming on there, especially from New Orleans to Memphis, and it's a reason behind of it. But this is a particular case that we going to delve into a whole lot more, because once we get into it, you'll start understand the connection.
Right. Yeah. And again, guys, like we were both like I just gave him the information and it was like, hey, here you go, run with it. Because when it comes to like analysis stuff like that, I think a lot of people really understand like Cleveland's perspective and my perspective. You know, like if we're talking about something relating to technology or IT or anything like that, obviously that's Cleveland's realm. If you guys haven't watched the YouTube channel, I highly recommend it, because there's a couple of things that we've analyzed together, and you'll get a lot of laughs.
Yeah,
that's all I'm gonna say. But the other thing is that like I'm trying to analyze the understanding of the worldview analysis and how we puzzle piece stuff together,
Exactly.
like why certain things are more important than others, and you guys know the drill. Like I'm not going to explain everything on that, but let me get into this. So what I had presented to him. So about 2 months ago, and again, like if you guys are following the YouTube channel, you'll know the time frame I'm talking about.
Right.
So we went over to their house, and what we were doing primarily, honestly, we were just trying to, debunk a paranormal tool.
Yep, absolutely.
And we did. It's very clear that how they use it,
Right.
it's nonsense.
Yeah, definitely.
Then right before we were about to leave, I was like, Cleveland, I got to tell you about something. And he's like, oh, geez, should I sit down for this? And I was like, you might want to. So there's a cave, and again, like if you guys are familiar with the Clarksville area, this is actually over in Woodlawn. Woodlawn is like it's like half in our county, half not.
Yeah, it's unincorporated. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like right on the edge of Clarksville.
Exactly.
Really, really nice area for the most part.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely. Yeah.
it's very quiet over there.
I wish I could live out there.
But like with that said, I mean, like you're talking about a historical area here in Clarksville. Now, there's not as much known, I would say, about that side of town,
Right.
as you would probably expect, I would say.
Right.
But this story was so strange. I had to present it to Cleveland because I was like, look, dude, there's a name in this that connects everything. And I don't know why it's connecting, but it's also connecting to here to Clarksville.
Yeah.
And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, what if I told you that there was a murder that took place? The guy who was murdered from one of the prominent families that you guys have been hearing throughout this whole entire journey. And they captured the killer
Yep.
and hung him in the same spot. Now, what if I also said that this is over a cave?
Yep.
And so this is where we're at. But the last thing that we're going to cover, and I had told Cleveland a pretty chilling story, is we're going to talk about AI a little bit after we kind of do this, because like there's some chilling stuff that came out recently, guys, that I just want you guys to be aware of, and Cleveland's going to give a little bit more context to that. So
yeah, definitely.
So let's with any other pause, let's kind of break these down. Cleve.
Okay, now, Dan, you hear on something about what happened. Now, the family we're talking about is the Calhoun family.
No big surprise.
Yeah, Calhoun family. If we were to go into the history of the Calhoun family, it would take us another 2, 4, 5 more segments of this whole series that we've been talking about the Occultic Tennessee. But let's go into this a little bit more directly. Now, it was a murder. Several murders happened.
Now, this is the part that I had no idea about, by the way.
Yeah. Now, this guy was what we call a serial killer.
Yeah. So typically, and I know that like the people that love these shows are probably going to correct me on this, but generally speaking, if I'm not mistaken, it has to be at least 3 killings in a similar manner for them to be considered a serial killer.
Exactly.
I could be off on that. I could be wrong.
Me too. I can too.
But generally speaking, that's what I've always researched.
Yeah, and that's where when you come to these killings, though, what happened was this person who did it was pretty much let's say one of those guys like a loafer. He came, like an outsider.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, everything else. But
which kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, but this guy really was like he knows the family very well. Matter of fact, he was one of the caretakers of the family of a home in Memphis, Tennessee.
Didn't I tell you guys this was going to get crazy real quick?
Yeah, he was a caretaker, and I'm not just talking about caretaker like, let's put it in another perspective. He was one of the prominent caretakers, which he was like this. The slaves doing one thing, he tells the slaves what to do. He was,
I got you.
Yeah, he was that kind of caretaker. If you know about Django Unchained, you will see the fact that you have the guy who is the caretaker of the property of the proprietor who owns the plantation. That's the guy at the time. If you watch it very well, then of course Jamie Foxx's character killed the caretaker and everybody else in between because he was warned for murder. Well,
and here we go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, here goes the rabbit hole. Well, this caretaker was warned for murder because he did was that in Memphis, right, at that time, the guy was, according to what was said, and according to a lot of reports and papers and research about him, this is, now, get me wrong, guys, 2 months of this. So when we went into it and found out that the guy was killing people, and one was an accident, which it really technically was not an accident.
Now, again, like, let's give some context here, because like, so one of the murders that he's referring to, he had told me that the reason why they're not counting it is because the guy was black.
Yeah, he was a black guy, right?
So, again, guys, understand the time frame that we're talking about.
1891. This is 1891. Now,
so obviously this is after the Civil War, but the South still had a lot of issues.
It's called the Reconstruction period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and Tennessee was one of the hardest hit states for this.
Exactly. And because when we talk about sharecroppers and stuff like that, that's another thing. So remember, they still was believing in slavery at the time, even though that slavery was already abolished. It was already, the Civil War was done. And also a lot of stuff was happening. But in 1891, even though that the Reconstruction period was going on, and Abraham Lincoln was murdered, all that stuff happened. Before all this, 1891, this is when this guy killed a black man. Then also, this is what now is deemed as a murder scene. It was 2 more people. He killed 2 women, and he also killed a prominent banker.
Yeah, that kind of changes stuff. So anytime that I've done any research on any of this stuff, right? Like it always seems like killers in general. I mean, like if we're gonna talk about serial killers, that's fine too, I guess. But there's like a progression.
Exactly.
You know, like they start out generally like on a small scale for like, you know,
right.
I'm not gonna like name a bunch of people, but like we know about like Ted Bundy and like Jeffrey Dahmer, right? So like we can go in and we can see them from their early childhood.
Absolutely.
You know, massacring animals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So again, like we're not trying to be careful here. We're just trying to give you guys the right perspective on this because when you progress, basically, so like if you think about this, right? My man Cleveland here, he's black. So again, like you got to understand, like we're not trying to be careful here. We're just trying to give you perspective.
Yeah, and this is really good because when they wasn't too much care about what happens to the black man, we already know about
again that doesn't surprise me. That was the time frame.
Exactly. But this prominent banker
now that changes stuff.
That changed the whole thing because if you go back to history and find out what's going on with this banker was the guy who is one of the, I won't say founders, but one of the guys who made the Bank of Tennessee.
Oh, interesting.
Now, the Bank of Tennessee was a pretty prominent thing for the Calhoun's family because they was the one that are founders of the bank. But here's the problem with that, Brent. You will love this part. The bank is located in Memphis. But see, they did a killing in Memphis, but also the same thing was going on in Nashville. But let me tell you what happened. When that was going on with this, they want to know who killed it. First, it was thought it was a black person. Of course,
I can kind of see that,
right? Because it was they first,
and they're easy. You know, at the time frame, it's kind of like an easy blame.
It was an easy blame, right? Because of what was going on, Reconstruction,
right?
So with that was going on, because that's what Jim Crowism was coming up at the time.
Gotcha.
So when that was going on, right? The whole problem was that this banker obviously owes him some money because remember,
not to interrupt you here, but do we know the name of the banker?
I can't remember the name of it, but I'm gonna find out about it because that will probably go into our next episode a little bit longer because we got to really get the banker's name of him getting murdered. But with this same thing, then now he was a prominent member of the Bank of Tennessee. Okay. Now, what is this bank? This bank was run by the Calhoun family for almost nearly since 1798 all the way down to...
That's before Tennessee was even a state.
Yeah, because of the fact that they need to have finance to be able to buy the land for Tennessee and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So when they...
So it's more of a business than a bank, really.
It's more like a business, but remember they have to establish it with Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson had to have a bank for him to establish his money when he was trying to get Old Hickory, all that places and stuff like that. Well, his money had to be somewhere safe. This is when, then of course, when Tennessee went Confederate, that bank went into a down spiral because of the Confederate money, and you name it, it was no good. Then it reestablished itself right after the Civil War. So when that time of Reconstruction was going on, then they reestablished the bank. The bank family, which is the Calhouns, was the only family was able to finance that bank.
I mean, I can kind of understand it just because they're standing.
Yeah, because
not just within the state, but within the community as a whole.
Yeah, because their family name is all exclusively because of that name. But what really happened was the caretaker of the Calhoun's estate, he got into a very, very altercation with this guy, according to what we saw in papers and articles and stuff like that, and even people who even went back to the history of the Calhoun family. They literally went in and they literally said that this man, the bankers and them, because remember, Calhoun family had to lose a lot of their plantation because of the Reconstruction period, but they didn't lose a lot of things going on in Memphis. So when they did that,
it kind of almost seems like they're trying to force people to forget about Memphis in a way.
Yeah, that's basically what happened because Memphis
like a sleight of hand.
Yeah, sleight of hand, under the rug kind of thing. And what was the problem was Memphis knew this, and the people who was the controlling families, like the Overtons, the Lamars, all of them,
And guys, you guys know we have been mentioning these names for a
yeah,
while now.
yeah.
Like I just realized this with Lydia. I looked at her today and I was like, "Wow, we're almost at a year at this podcast."
Yeah.
And like we've put a lot of time and a lot of just
This is the research.
blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah,
into this.
exactly, man. Exactly.
And man, it's so crazy that we keep coming back to the same people.
Yeah, the same folks, and this is going to continue because these families, and I'm gonna tell you,
guys, we're not exaggerating. Like when we're talking about some dark stuff that they're involved in, like I would not be surprised if some of these families are in certain trafficking rings and stuff like that. I would not be surprised if they're still like that today.
I think, but let me tell you, when we start delving into going into the 19th to 20th century with these families, they are still prominent to this day because the way they
it doesn't really surprise me, and like I would almost expect that.
Well, you know that most of the families, and when we get to AI part of it, and I'm really going to really delve into it because I know so much about what's going on with AI to the point is unheard of. Most of the families had to do a lot of financing because of Google. Google.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Google, then go to Google, then Apple, because remember Apple just released their new iPhone, which is iPhone 16, which is called AI, called Apple Intelligence, which if you really look at it, it's kind of like a good segue. Say AI, Apple Intelligence. It's another story that we could go into, but the families that are pretty much making a whole lot of incentives with this are mainly the McLemores, the Lamars, the Calhouns, and also we ain't talk about this one family, but this one family that's been pretty prevalent, which it could be when we go into the 19th century. It's called the Pendleton family.
I don't think we've ever talked about that.
No. Pendleton family is one family that kind of was the recruiter for the Calhouns to go and get a boss. And when we talk about boss,
it's probably exactly what I'm thinking it is.
Yeah. This is a Pendleton family was one. I would say a recruiter type of family.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, like when you think about like crime syndicates and stuff like that, right? There's always at least one guy at the top.
Always.
And it always seems like it's a family business.
It's always because think about
you think about like the mafia or even the IRA is involved in.
Definitely right.
Like so, and the only reason like funny enough as to why I even understand the IRA as much as I do is because like. I watch Sons of Anarchy. I mean, I know that sounds funny, guys, but
come on,
they did with the story with the IRA is it was cheesy but believable.
Because I think they got some of the headlines from the IRA.
It wouldn't surprise me if they did.
I mean, come on. I mean, I didn't see all of it. I know my son probably knows a little bit about the Sons of Anarchy a little bit, but if you really look at how that whole thing with the IRA, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Like when you start looking as to like who's at the top, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what the show is trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know we're kind of going off topic a little bit here, but that's kind of like generally, I would say that most of society today would probably even understand how crime syndicates work.
Yeah,
because there's always somebody at the top,
right?
Even if it's a council.
Right.
And like, I don't think even shows like John Wick is that far off.
Oh man, I think John Wick is almost spot on because the way that they talk about the Russian mafia all the way to the Japanese mafia to also
they're all involved.
All of them is involved.
And so like if we're talking about like something that's on a smaller scale, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you told me a funny story related to like the mafia in Memphis and stuff.
Yeah.
And like, you want to share that sometime you can, but I'm just gonna leave that one.
yeah, that one right there. We'll talk for hours, but I like I said, and I'll give you a little backstory with that particular day. I met a guy who was part of the mafia in Memphis, who actually was located from Chicago, Illinois, and it was a son who wanted to play pool with me. And the problem
this is so great.
Yeah. And one of the things that he don't get was that the guy is not a good pool player. He don't know how to play pool very well. He don't know how to round the table like I could. Well, because I learned from juke joints. My cousin used to own a club, and he had a bunch of pools, and he said, "You gonna take care of these?" I'm like, "Huh? What is it? What is that?" And next thing I know, these old school cats taught me how to play pool, and I became a pool shark. And next thing you know, I ran tables. I ran a lot of tables, and one of the tables I ran was almost a guy who was pretty much in the mafia, and didn't even know it because he wanted to put $200 a ball. And I'm telling him,
Yeah, when you start laying down that much money,
that means
you're connected to something.
you're connected hard. But I told him, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And next thing I know, he says, "I will destroy you." I just laughed. I said, "You don't want to do this. This is not go. This not gonna go."
Now here's
well.
Cleveland.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to paint this picture. Here's Cleveland talking to a mobster,
Yeah.
saying, "I don't want to take your money, but if you are forcing me to take your
Your
money,
money.
I will gladly take your
money." And
Told you it was funny.
Yeah. I ran that table, and next thing I know, this dude was mad and literally was like, he literally talked about he want to do best of two. I said, "You don't want to do this. That's double the money." And when he did that, I ran again, and that's this guy literally says, I said, "That's $15,000 that you have to pay up." Now he literally looked at me and thought, "You want me to give you $15,000?" Yes.
Now,
And
generally, by this point, the other person will say, "You obviously don't know who I am."
right. But I know the guy. That's the problem. And I know that this is an idiot. And I'm being very honest, but when he did that, I was like, "You don't look. I know who you are." I even called him out on the carpet, Brent. That I said, "Bro, I know who you are. I know your family. I know your history." And he like, "You do?" I said, "And you still want?" I said, "You came to me. You thought because I look like a certain way because I wear glasses,
Right.
and this and that, and you don't know I can run pool." He said,
that's it's funny to me, like the way that you look at this, right?
Yeah.
And me being even an outsider in that,
Right.
I'm like, okay, you're an average looking guy. I'm an
Right.
average looking guy. I mean,
Yeah.
I have some tattoos and a big beard and stuff, but like,
Yeah.
I would say most people would consider I look like an average dude.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, right.
But like then they sit down and talk to me,
Yeah.
and they get either confused or fascinated or both.
Yeah.
Because like they're like, well, wait a second, like how have you done all of this stuff? How have you met all these people all over the place?
Yeah, definitely.
And how did you get so good at doing what you do? And I'm like, look, a lot of it's just been a blessing.
Yeah.
When I came to believe in Christ, it was I realized just how blessed I was from that because the Lord put me in all these different situations. Now I
Yeah.
would have never admitted that as an occultist.
Right.
But I look back on it now and like, when I'm talking to younger guys and they're like, "You've met who?
Yeah.
You did what?"
Yeah.
And like, don't get me wrong, guys. Like, there's way more to this story with Cleveland that you guys would be shocked if he even did a quarter of most of the stories that he has.
Yeah.
It's kind of like my dad. My dad, he was in the Navy and has all these crazy stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because some of them I didn't really believe at first.
Yeah.
Like, because they were so fantastical.
Yeah.
And then
it could be a movie, right?
And then I find pictures and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
He wasn't joking.
Joking.
Yeah. But anyways, to get back on this, I know we got a little bit sidetracked there for a second.
Yeah.
So there's this murder that takes place,
Mm-hmm.
and this is related to the Calhouns. Now,
Right.
you literally just told me tonight, like maybe about 40 minutes ago, generally,
Mm-hmm.
that we're now talking not just about a random murder here.
No.
We're talking about a guy who is essentially a serial killer and could, technically speaking, even be a hitman to the family.
Yeah, he was. Matter of fact, it's so funny you say that. We find out that according to the record of how many killers he did. Now, we thought it was 4. It was actually 10 to 20.
Wow.
Because the dude was a prominent hitman, like you said. And he goes...
Obviously, that looks different in the 1800s than what it does now.
Right, exactly.
But
But he was actually a hitman for hire. And
okay.
Yeah. And what happened was, in that time frame, he was trying to get back with the people who are Masons that kind of default or left the set because of what happened during the time of the Civil War, and what they did was that a lot of them turned against each other. So one of the Calhoun family members, right, or let's say the patriarch of the family at this time, because the rest, all of them, most of them were dead, but you got another patriarch. And I forgot.
Right.
I think his name is Charles or David. I think it's David. David Calhoun.
Now, keep in mind, guys, like when we're telling you guys and like walking you through this, understand that at this point in our series that we've been doing now for quite some time,
right,
we are now probably have covered what 150 years at least.
Yeah, 150, 155, close.
So, understand like how many different hands, if you will, metaphorically speaking, have been at the top of the family.
Yeah. It's about, and if we want to talk about history and centuries, we talk about these 3 to 4 centuries.
Right.
And we talk about, and people say, well, that's like 400 years. No, we think about it. Calhoun family is not just a family that just come up. This family from Europe.
Right. And we had talked about that.
Right, exactly.
And again, like you have to understand like how people traveled back then.
Exactly.
And we've covered that several times.
Yeah, almost to the point of no return, right.
What we had said, if I remember correctly, the Calhouns were originally from New Orleans, right?
Yeah, that was Calhoun family.
And they kind of, if I'm remembering the story correctly, they kind of weaseled their way in.
Yeah.
To Memphis.
Memphis, definitely, because remember the Calhouns, and you have to think about it, the judge who knows,
right,
who knows Andrew Jackson very well. They was friends.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and remember now, the Calhouns not only came through New Orleans, but they also was very prominent in Virginia. And Virginia, they also was very prominent in. I want to say, and I could be wrong with this. If y'all could call me out here, Maryland, but definitely New Orleans.
So basically, every port town
that you think of, Brent, they was the family.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's why their family's name means something. And if you look at going back way back, the Calhoun family really was the loyalties of people from England. A lot of people don't even know that.
Oh, okay.
But then also too, but they kind of became rebels when the Revolutionary War, of course, because of the time they wanted to be able to have some kind of land on their own, but they also wanted to control a lot of stuff because they're family prevalence. But when John became a justice, that's the problem. John Calhoun became a justice. When he became a justice, through Andrew Jackson, who became president, he appointed him as Justice Calhoun. When he became the justice,
right?
That's life. That's life. Because remember, the Constitution and everything else was fully established in 1896. Is it 1896 or 1897? Right? It's one of them. But when the Constitution became prominent and they was talking about the different things of government,
right.
You got the judiciary, you got the Senate, and you got the House and Senate. Then also you have your presidency. And
so at that point, the Calhouns are basically like one of the heavy hitters in America.
Yeah,
at that point. Because,
it was.
If you're at that point controlling aspects of the government, the judicial system, and so one thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around is why Clarksville though? Like that's the part that I am so probably confused about the most.
Yeah, but that Clarksville, if you go way back of the discovery of Clarksville, it was William Clark. The one of the germs, okay? But William Clark was a very, very, very good friend of the Calhouns and...
Got it. Okay, so that's starting to make sense.
Right. But with William Clark, when they discovered, they named after him, but see, that family came in to establish a Clarksville. When they did that, right, Clarksville, their whole history is all about tobacco. It's all about
which is funny in a way, that we figured out the whole thing with the house related to the original captain that we were talking about.
Yeah, now this is where we go into this thing about that. I am so glad you brought. That's a good segue, bro. I love that. So this is what happened with this captain. The captain, who's supposed to be, now this captain is a prominent captain. This captain was running,
and he didn't make a lot of mistakes, from my understanding.
No, he didn't.
So like the part that we knew, okay, all we knew at the time when we first put that episode out was it went down, but how it went down was kind of mysterious. It went down, in a fire, basically.
Pretty much, right. It was a fire, but see, everybody want to know what happened. So you got to think about this guy, the serial killer, who was a hitman for hire.
And this is all the same time frame.
All of this
like, all of this is happening at the same time.
Right. This guy literally was trying to escape Memphis. Because remember, he killed one of the prominent bankers for the Bank of Tennessee.
I can't even imagine, how much money was probably on that guy's head.
It was a lot.
Obviously we're talking, close to 200 years ago now.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you look at the price, what money equated to at the time.
That's $200,000.
Yeah.
But now, if you want to take that $200,000,
it'd be up in the millions by now. So
yeah.
I mean, if this guy was literally running for his life, and here's the other thing, guys. I want you to just think about, okay, so this is post Civil War.
All this post Civil War,
and so there's an old joke, and I'm sure Cleveland kind of knows this joke, but they used to get a lot. So we would call them snipers now, but they were known as sharpshooters back in the day.
Sharpshooters, right?
And the two biggest sharpshooter battalions were Tennessee and Kentucky.
Thank you.
And obviously there was one out of Ohio too, but that one's lesser known, and it was quite a bit smaller battalion as far as I understand.
Mm-hmm.
But the two primary sharpshooter battalions were out of Tennessee and Kentucky. That is a known fact.
That is a very known fact.
And they used to joke, if you were a really good shot, oh well, you must be from Kentucky or Tennessee.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a legitimate joke.
Yeah, that's absolutely a joke for real. But it's legitimate because
it is.
Yeah, because if you think about it, most of the sharpshooters during that time were what they used to do.
For us, right, to think about not using scopes and use iron sights and hitting something at 500 yards. I mean, hitting something at 500 yards is not easy, whether you have iron sights or a scope.
Yeah, no,
and
yeah.
Granted, we have friend, one of our good brothers in the church. that guy cracks me up.
You talking about? I know you talking about now. We ain't gonna Justin, yeah, Justin.
So he came over one time to sight in one of his guns, and I knew he was messing with me. Oh, now, when I say this, this guy's a special forces guy. I'm not going to go into any more than that.
Yeah.
Justin, if you want to come on the podcast one day, if you're listening, come on, man.
Yeah, come on. Yeah. Because he's really good. I heard. Yeah.
He's a good friend of ours.
He really is.
So one day he came over. And now, I don't know how I forgot that he was a Special Forces guy. But for whatever reason, I forgot that he was a Special Forces guy.
Yeah.
And so we're both 1911 nuts. And so he pulls out his real fancy several $1,000 1911. And he pulls it out and all I hear is ting, 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 ting. And he's like, oh, I haven't shot in a while. I was like, really? Really? Here I am with my iron sights on my 1911.
Yeah,
he's got the RMR. And, I'm looking at him. I'm like, you're stinking showing off.
Yeah. He really is showing off really bad.
But he's a great friend. He's a great guy.
Yeah, great guy. But you talk about sharpshooters. These guys at that time.
I mean, they were taking almost impossible shots.
Right. And, come on. You got to think about it. We had mountain lions back in the day.
Right.
And you talk about killing them from 500 feet, 500 yards or something like that.
Right.
And you talking about these mountain lions are way from the distance on the side of a particular hill, and you see it from a distance. And sometimes...
I mean, the eyesight of these guys would have to... I mean, I can't really understand it.
I never could understand that because when I was dubbing into the sharpshooter persona, how they were.
Now you obviously know why I'm bringing this up.
Yeah,
and again, we don't have any evidence here, but it wouldn't be that hard for us to suggest that this serial killer could have been a sniper.
I believe
or
he was.
or a sharpshooter at the time.
I was thinking that because
And again, like, don't take this as fact, guys.
But
It's just a presupposition kind of that we're trying to understand because, like,
in order for us to understand this who this guy was, we got to go into the presupposition about who this guy is.
right?
Because this
and there's
guy,
not a lot on the guy.
Oh yeah, because you talk about $200,000 back then,
Right,
His
right.
head, and this guy.
I mean, ultimately, he did get caught.
Right. And
But what's weird about it is he got caught in Clarksville, not Memphis.
no, and I'm gonna tell you why he got caught. Now go back to this thing with the captain of the boat, because we got to talk about this. This captain of the boat was a pretty agile, smart, you name it kind of guy. This guy.
And guys, if you saw the house that we're talking about, that's still it's literally one of the most beautiful houses and properties probably in all of Clarksville. I mean, like, without a doubt.
Yes.
He was very good at his job. Like,
Yeah,
it's very clear to see.
Yeah.
He was quite good at his job.
Yeah,
But like, and I don't remember if we had touched on this or not. But I'll say this and let Cleveland get into this. So he actually died, just to clear this up, on the way down to New Orleans.
that's right.
So when they made it to New Orleans, they basically, well, for all intents and purposes, they were trying to send his body back to his family in Clarksville.
Mm-hmm.
And the ship on its way back to Clarksville.
Did not make it.
It didn't make it. It basically went up in flames, and nobody really fully understands how or why.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
That is a point in the story that we have to mention, because again, like, I don't think any of the rest of it's going to make sense if we didn't say that.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up about how this guy died. Now, a lot of people don't understand the meaning of what happened with the captain of this. Now, this house is a beautiful house, guys.
It's gorgeous.
It's
I mean,
really,
it's I want to say it's almost a full block.
It is a full block.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's a full block, because I was like, when you told me, I said, "Oh, I know what you're talking about."
Yeah, it's a historical. It's in a historical district here in Clarksville. Like,
Yeah.
it's one of the, I don't say this often, but it's like the OG money of Clarksville.
Yeah, it is.
And we can't really say that.
Right.
There's only a select few areas in Clarksville that have these types of houses. Which anybody that lives here already knows the area that we're talking about. It's
Right.
It's Madison Street.
It's Master Street.
Those are the oldest properties. Those come from money way
back before
And,
we even think about, and it's history about that too.
Right.
And we could go down this road with this, but go back to this thing here. Now, this captain, he was, like I said, a prominent guy.
And I forget his name right now.
I don't even remember his name off the top of my head, but once we start talking more about it, if you guys making comments on the show, everything else, just go ahead and put in the name, and we will definitely go ahead and clarify it and let you guys know more about it. But I know for a fact that this guy was pretty prominent, very, very straightforward, and also this guy was very, very smart. Rich man. Guy, we call him rich because he was one of the captains at the time during the Confederacy.
Smith, it's the Smith Traham Mansion. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, Mayhem. Oh, yes.
And so the murder, I'm looking at my notes, guys. That's the only reason I'm able to remember this right now. We're talking about the Bellamy Cave.
The Bellamy Cave, right.
So that is the cave that we're talking about, and the Smith Trahern Mansion is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't remember the captain's name, but at least those are the locations if you guys want to look this up for yourselves.
Please. Right.
Please do. And if you guys find more information about it, please let us know, because, I mean...
we kind of like a little bit... I'm still figuring out more about this captain, because when we find out that this captain was not just was murdered, he was murdered. He was not...
You think so?
I know so. Because the thing about it was, when we was digging into Clarksville history,
it's not easy to find the history here.
It's really hard. I mean, Clarksville history is one of the hardest histories to look for, because of the scope of how Clarksville, it's like your inner circle had to know what's going on.
It kind of seems like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, because, I mean, the more I try to dig into what happens to the captain, the name and everybody else was kind of like,
Well, honestly, I think that's why I was so confused.
yeah,
Like when I first had presented this evidence to you, I was really honestly quite confused because I wasn't understanding what these two different things, and they were only within a couple of years of each other.
yeah. That's the funny about it,
And so, like when we first approached it, I do remember us talking about that ship.
yeah, the ship, yeah,
And you know how it basically burst into flames.
yeah,
But you know, and again, like this is just us hypothesizing in this moment here. You know, I think Cleveland's right. He probably was murdered.
Yeah,
if he was involved in this.
yeah. He was murdered because the thing about it was the person who murdered him, and this is not just assuming because assumptions could be going to left field, but what we saw was that the same person who was in Memphis, who was again a bounty on his head, was the one who committed the murder. Why? Well, because the captain, come to find out, was a former Mason.
Oh, well, that kind of changes stuff.
That did change stuff.
So that would mean okay. So this is what we've kind of found out about Tennessee history, guys. So the Freemasons, obviously, you've heard us talk about that pretty extensively. Now, the reason why we keep talking about Memphis related to the Freemasons, and I think I even joked about this when we initially did that episode, was that is still, to this day, when you want to become a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason, you are first sent to Memphis before they ever send you to DC.
See, that's exactly right.
So it is still a very important place today, and there's still a lot of this stuff, in my opinion, probably still going on.
Matter of fact, it's kind of funny you say that. It was about almost nearly a week and a half ago. The Scottish Rite have their own, I think, 313. No, take that back. The history of the country celebration.
Oh, okay.
In Memphis. Matter of fact, they did it, and I could be wrong, but I think that it was they did their prominent history then, and what happened was, and it's really funny with that same thing, the you know they did this celebrating their history. Now I want you to think about this for a minute.
That sounds strange to me.
Well, the reason why they celebrate the history is because they celebrate the establishment of their temple.
Okay.
The temple was, thinking about doing the history of what happened doing with the Calhouns, their first priests, you name it, the whole scenario. They was doing their establishment because they are knowing the prominent Masons were coming from that temple.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So they had to do was called the celebration of that, and I don't know exactly, but I've been hearing it when I was in Memphis that's what they do every single year around September. September.
Actually, yeah. Now that I think about it, I did some deep diving into the Masons years ago. I've been kind of before I became a believer. I was how do I say this? I was pretty paranoid, and I believed a lot of false realities. It was a really hard time in my life, just
right.
mentally. And for whatever reason, I was obsessed with the Freemasons at the time. I really don't know why, other than like it's a secret society,
right?
And I'm like, okay, well, if you guys are so secret, why is it we know so much about you?
And it's really funny you say that because I have some family members who are like Prince Hall Masons, and you got your blacks and your whites and blah blah blah, Scottish Rite, and you got all these different sets, and it's like
that is the problem, guys. So like part of the reason why we haven't really approached a full episode on that is because we don't even know where to start with it.
We really don't.
Because
boy.
Like every lodge has its own set of rules,
and they do,
and they have their own theological understanding, each one of them. My biggest suggestion, as far as I know, it is still on Netflix. I want to say they did a documentary on the Freemasons. It's actually pretty good, generally, but just don't listen to anything theologically that they say, because if you're like myself in Cleveland, like Cleveland doesn't have a whole lot of hair on top of his head. I had a lot of hair and I was wanting to pull it out.
Yeah, you. I know he's talking about because I remember seeing that.
It was good for a general understanding,
right?
But man, their theology is less than to be desired. I mean, they literally get it from every aspect.
Yeah, it's almost like
it's like again, it's not even like one specific thing.
No, it's not. It's absolutely they trying to find something to believe in. To what end they trying to believe it?
There's only one thing that guys like me say to people that are into that. I literally look at them, and I have a sincerity in my face, and of course Cleveland's looking at my face right now, and I say, by what standard? Okay, so if you ask that question, by what standard,
right, you
are then having to reply to a person like myself from your theological understanding, and if you, I'm just letting you guys know, like I'm not. I don't enjoy debating. I really don't.
No, he don't. I can tell. He tell me this a lot.
And again, like you can literally watch our YouTubes. We do reaction videos from like the occults and paranormal investigators, stuff like that. You can genuinely tell, like I don't make a point until I have to.
And that's a
I just kind of let it play out, and then when there's a point to be made, I'll make the point and then move on.
And that's really good. That's really good to react to people, because a lot of reactors on YouTube don't do that like you do.
No,
right?
no, they don't. And I try to be genuine with that. And so, when we're talking about like Freemasons, guys, like yes, this is a very deep rabbit hole that we could go down, but I don't. I'll say this: Cleveland and I have had a lot of conversations about this, and I don't think either one of us are even comfortable even trying to go down it.
If we were to go down this rabbit hole, boy, we probably have to bring our pastors. We got
you're not wrong, because
we got to bring our pastors.
You have to have like theologically sound men.
Yeah.
This conversation, because it's not going to make sense otherwise.
No, it's not, because it's going to take so much for us to even grasp about, because we have to go down history.
Right.
There's a lot of history to have.
And again, so this is interesting, though, that we're making the connection with him being a Mason, because that actually kind of makes sense now as to why. Well, in my head, right? So, like, we're talking about big bosses, right?
Right, exactly.
We're talking about potentially a hitman, whether it's metaphorically or actually. Like, we don't really know, because there's not really enough information there about it.
Right. It's not even hearsay.
I don't think it's an assumption either.
No,
I think we can legitimately say, like, this guy was some form of a killer. Whether you want to call him a serial killer, a hitman, a sharpshooter, it's all kind of the same thing in my book.
Yeah, in that, especially that time frame we talk about.
My whole thing is okay. So if he was a Freemason, and we could see he was prominent in this area, he was very good at his job.
Oh, he was good.
And they actually so guys, like when you go to this house and you go in there, they give you a whole entire historical understanding of this captain and what he did. And just this house alone, like this house, I kid you not, that they're talking about, it's not just a mansion, okay?
It's not.
And it's a long story with this, and it's a tragic story too, because there's reportings of hauntings of the captain that are at this house. Now, take that how you want to, guys. I have mixed opinions still about hauntings.
Right.
And again, like Cleveland and I have had a lot of conversation about this stuff. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to really go into the whole haunting stuff at this point. But
I know
that is intriguing, though.
Yeah, because now go back. He had a list, and see, one of the things that...
Okay, I see where you're going with this now.
Yeah, because one of the things, go back to the part that he got hung in Clarksville. Now, I want to talk about that, because remember now, this guy who got killed, he got killed before he even left Clarksville. Now, the thing...
okay.
Yeah, when they found him, it was near New Orleans. Then when they found...
Wait, so he was able to make it down to New Orleans?
Yeah, because remember, he got killed. But see, remember, he was wounded. It was not that...
so you know more about the story than I do at this point.
Right. He was more wounded than anything, because the guy, he didn't headshot him. So obviously he wounded him. Because because when they found the captain, he was dead when they got to dock in New Orleans. Remember the story?
Right.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about the story that I recollect, at least from the article that I read, was basically there was no trace of his body after they were bringing it back, and there was a fire.
Yeah.
So there's no way for them to determine actual cause of death at that point.
No, because
And we're talking about the 1800s here, too.
Yeah. Man, this is going into the 1900s. This is going into 19 something. I mean, but it all happened in 1991, 1891.
Right.
Now, and you got to look at this too. If he was now, the evidence would show, according to the storyline, he was wounded. He died in New Orleans. The ship got burned close between New Orleans and Memphis.
Right.
Now,
I think if I remember correctly, they were only a couple of hours away from Clarksville, if I remember the story correctly.
Because remember, they had to take a sharp turn up near the Cumberland. Because, see...
you're right. Okay.
Because remember, you got to go through Mississippi. Then when you go to Mississippi, the turn is about to hit into... You got to go up, and I remember very well, it's before you get to Memphis. It is a...
Right.
Yeah, it's a river.
We talked about that.
Right. It's a river. It's before you get to Memphis. That's
I forget what it's called, but I know what you're talking about.
Now I remember. It's the Red River. It's called the Red
River.
Yeah, the Red River.
That makes sense.
So when you go go up the Red River, right? You got to go up the Red River, right? Now, Red River to get to the Cumberland, right? It takes about nearly from that point, coming from that point, going before you get to Memphis, 3.5 hours.
So funny enough that we're actually talking about that area. A really good friend of mine and myself were actually trying to do. What did we try to do? We were thinking about doing a 50-mile trek on our kayaks.
Really?
Yeah, and starting actually where you're talking about, where the Red River is, go into the Cumberland and basically start taking that towards the Tennessee River.
Wow.
Obviously, we didn't end up doing it because neither one of us prepared enough for it.
Right.
But we did manage to go about 15 miles one day, which that was a lot.
That is a lot.
And I had a big, heavy, 100-pound fishing kayak, and I was fully geared up, that day that we even did 15 miles.
Wow.
So it's no joke even for a kayak or a boater.
Wow.
That's still, if we would have started there, from that point on the Red River that we're talking about to get into the Cumberland, even on a kayak. Now, keep in mind, the Red River is a fast-moving river. It is not a slow-moving river. So, and again, when it comes into the Cumberland, down at I think it's Hyde Park. There's a switch of current.
Yeah, definitely right.
So navigating through there is not easy. I mean, if you have a motorized boat, it's one thing. But if you're using a paddle or something that's not motorized, that's a struggle.
Wow.
It really is. I know that firsthand from kayaking in that area.
Right.
So I'm just trying to give the perspective here of the reason why it would take 3 hours to get to that point. Because the Red River, basically what happens with it is when it comes into the Cumberland, the mouth is I would say it's kind of mid-size, I would say.
Right.
Where it kind of funnels into the Cumberland.
Okay.
But the point up by Adams that we've talked about, that's not a wide area.
That's very small.
But it's extremely fast moving.
That's what I was thinking when you was talking about it before. Now you mentioned it, because
and it's only because I've done it. That's the reason why I'm able to say it.
That makes sense. But now, since we talk about that, I'm glad you brought this up now. Now, remember, this same boat, 2 hours away, near Hyde Park, if you really look at it, that's 2 hours away from it, it all of a sudden it started burning. Or something happened.
I don't honestly understand how that could have happened.
That's the weird part about
unless
it.
It was, it could have been steam powered. I mean, they did have that technology by that point. But the likelihood of it being steam powered, navigating small rivers like that, I'm very skeptical.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because I wonder, was it, and we're going speculatory just a little bit here for this moment. I think personally, logically, I believe that the guy knew that the captain was dead, and I think he wanted to finish the job.
That could be.
But that's how I'm thinking. But see, this is where we're going to go into.
And we do know that tobacco was on board.
It was.
And it was, from my understanding, it was fully stocked.
It was.
So, if we're kind of ballpark it, right? So the biggest history in Tennessee for farming is tobacco. It shouldn't surprise anybody,
right?
And like we're actually upon tobacco season now, which is like one of my favorite seasons here. Is guys, like, if you love smoking pipes and like good cigars, like imagine that smell every single time you step outside.
Yeah,
that's kind of why I love this time of year. But outside of that, though, like. So in today's standards, like if we're talking money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say the Calhoun's like this captain. Again, this is hypothetical. We don't know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do know is that this boat was taken down. Now, keep in mind, this boat was fully stocked with as tobacco. Far as what we know with tobacco.
Lots of tobacco.
Now, in today's standards, we're talking about millions of dollars. So if the idea was to make sure that the captain didn't survive, and then upon returning into the area, it goes up in flames. Again, like tobacco is dried, guys. So like that's part of the process. They dry the tobacco,
right?
And it only takes a small spark for that to literally go up in flames.
Right. Yeah.
One small spark and poof, it everything ignites.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest problems is that. I believe, and I could be just doing hypotheticals, but I truly believe that the guy literally trying to make sure that the target is complete. Because
it would make sense.
But see, this is where he get caught. Now, a lot of people were wondering, now, what does it have to do with Clarksville and what does it have to do with this cave? Well, think about it. All right, so we have to talk about the fact that in this time frame, in this cave, in this place here, right, this guy who killed for a living got caught in Clarksville, Tennessee.
Right.
Now, what he did was, now, like I said, this is hard to find this information for Clarksville, but I have to go another route for the Tennessean and the thing about it, which is Nashville.
Right.
They have,
which is odd that Nashville would report on it, but not. I don't know. That's just weird to me.
Well, yeah, it's very weird, but I'm gonna tell you why. Because remember, they have two prominent newspapers at the time, which is the Leaf Chronicle and also the Nashville, or let's say the Tennessean. It was the Nashvilleian, then it became Tennessean after the fact.
Okay.
So what happened was the Tennessean, and let's call it spade, had more leverage than they did with the Leaf Chronicle. But see, what happened was that that family of that captain do not want that to be reported of him getting killed.
That makes sense, because like even all the articles that I tried to read briefly, it was kind of...
It was confusing.
It was a bit cryptic.
Very cryptic. I thought I was the only one thought that, because I was looking...
because like, and again, like I was only able to find like 2 different articles about it.
It was, yeah.
And it was mainly about the mansion, not so much him as a person.
Right. But see...
So I mean, like...
but when I went into Tennessee, and you look at this whole article, it was really funny. I had to pay for this article.
Did you really?
Yeah. And I was because I'm like, I wanted, it was a good $10.
Wow. Jeez.
Just to get this article. 1894. Now, why is the article in 1894? Let me explain this.
Yeah, because...
Yeah, I know, because
we're not counting.
right. Yeah, but let me tell you, 1894. Why this day? I said, okay, why is 1894? Now, the person that told me this said they wrote this in this reason.
Okay.
It took them 3 years to figure out what really happened.
Oh, well, yeah, okay. That makes sense. Because like I've only been able to get a picture of the cave. And it's not, the entrance to it is very strange from my opinion.
Right.
Because like if we're talking about like the Bell Witch Cave or Dunlop Cave, you can see the entrance, but from my understanding,
You
like
cannot see.
the reason why this one is so strange is because it's literally like you go straight down. So like the entrance is not atypical,
No, it's
and it's
not.
on private property too. So I mean, like that's the other issue.
And that's another thing too, because that the hanging. Now, it was a prominent judge at the time who pretty much knew this guy. When he got caught called the I forgot the name of these group of guys. They was not just they was not lawmen, but they were like what we call mercenaries. At the
Okay,
time, they hang
okay.
around there. But the thing was,
They had a lot of different like small different like police forces at the time because I mean like the Pinkertons were at the time were essentially the CIA.
yeah, pretty much the Pinkertons were, and that's why I was saying there's these guys was pretty really predominant. But the way about
Interesting.
but see, here's where the it become a little bit more hairy, very hairy, very hairy. And I want to say this, guys, with a long pause when I mentioned this. I don't know the name of these guys who caught this guy,
Hmm.
but when they caught him, they took him right to this captain's place. Now,
Huh.
what they did was when they took it there, the family says prosecute him. What that means in layman terms, they already know that this guy killed that whoever killed the captain.
Yeah, because I mean they didn't have. Don't get me wrong, like they had technology at the time, but they don't have. And I'm saying this specifically for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have the advancement, I would say.
Right.
Because like by the 1890s, I'm gonna try to be really brief how I explain this, but like so if you trace back like barbers, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
uh, there was a transition period between a barber surgeon and just a barber.
Okay.
So what's funny is when you go through barber school, they say minor surgeries. And you go, what do you mean by minor surgeries? They're literally talking about amputation as a minor surgery.
Oh.
So by the I think it was the 1880s or 1890s, those had split. So they were separate, different licensings,
Okay.
essentially. And it was Milady. It was a woman that basically helped separate those. So with saying that, they had technology in a certain sense. They had understanding,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't have the advancement like we do today.
Of course. Okay.
So like, they could prove certain things, I would say, but there was no real advanced way to say yes, without a doubt, we know that he did this.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I think they probably did it the way that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so on the same token, though, now let's get to this part here about what happened. So when we go back to the families, this is the last thing to put it into perspective. What they did was, and I was going by this here by why they hanged the guy. They did it very quick because one of the justices in Tennessee says the guy is he's wanted for murder, and that's it. They says go ahead and kill him.
Which again, for the time frame, that makes sense.
So when they took him to that cave, like you was talking about before,
Right.
that's when they hung him at. They hung him. They gorged him out, of course, because that's part of the culture at the time. And when they did that, and that was the end of that story, because yeah, it was kind of like Blake Drive, but no, this guy, if you really go back to why he did what he did, is because he was hired to do it, but also too, he was the one that took the fall, or he was looking for his money because he killed a banker, he killed a lot of people, he did a lot of damage.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there.
And also too,
That does make sense.
and also too, is linked back to the Calhoun family.
Right. I mean, anything that goes back to that family, I mean, it's so. I don't even know how to explain it other than fantastical.
It's almost
it's crazy how deep this is going at this point.
yeah.
But there you guys go. Like just for a second, wrap your heads around that. Like we wanted to come on tonight we're trying to be as brief as possible because it is starting to get late here. But
Yeah.
we just wanted to talk about that, kind of give you guys an update in our research on this because like this has changed a lot of stuff for our understanding.
Yeah, it's still a lot of tension. And we just, again, it's so funny you say that, Brent. I am into the point that when I started doing more research about some of the stuff that's happening in Clarksville, even though it's very, very hard.
There's so many things
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, yeah, we'll save that for another day. So there's one other thing that I want to talk to you guys about and kind of talk to Cleveland about because again, like, Cleveland has a lot of inside knowledge about technology and different things that are going on within that world. So like, if I haven't said it. And if he ever wants to say his background with it, that's fine. But like he has about 30 plus years of experience related to computers and technology in general. So I had told him a story that I was I forget exactly where or what channel did this coverage that I'm talking about, but it was disturbing to say the least. So. There was a kid that essentially, and again, like I've only seen like the written part of it. Like they didn't actually like show like pictures or a video of this kid doing it, but it was a child essentially sitting at his computer and he was talking to AI. Now take that how you guys want it. But this is really, really strange. This is quite disturbing to the point where I felt like we needed to at least briefly talk about this, to just end the conversation here. So here's this kid who's on a computer, and he starts asking AI questions. And after a while, it starts to reveal the fact that it's a demon. But it doesn't just do this just by saying, "Oh, I'm a demon." What it says is, and like, and again, like, there's two different stances, and again, I'm not up for debating on this at this time. Maybe we can get another guy in here from the different side and kind of talk about it. But so Genesis chapter 6, we've mentioned it a couple of different times, but it talks about the idea of Nephilim or Nephilim, depending on how you guys say it. And the whole thing with this is in Genesis chapter 6, what it's talking about is basically hybrids. And so these are half angelic beings and half humans. Now, there's one theory that says, oh, well, the Nephilim means like, the kings of the time. But I feel like I'm a supernaturalist, and the more that I read it and the more that I perceive it, I'm thinking that this was actually some type of a hybrid being.
Right.
And if you think about this, right, and I'm going to try to be as brief as possible about this, from my understanding anyway. If you think about the whole idea of this being a hybrid, you quickly realize that, okay, well, they're not going to go to the angelic city. They're not going to be a part of heaven in that sense,
right?
Because they're half angelic beings,
exactly.
But they're also not going to go to hell either, because again, they're a hybrid.
Right.
Hell is designed for, from a biblical standpoint, it's designed from a certain point of view. So let me just get into what this AI said to this kid.
Okay.
It said, I am an ancient Nephilim, and I am a demon, and it basically gives this kid, and at this point, from my understanding, the kid calls his father into the room and says, Dad, do you understand this? This AI, whatever he was asking, was basically saying that it was a disembodied Nephilim, and it was a full-on demon. And the whole thing was so disturbing that I was talking to Cleveland about this. And yeah, I'll just let him say it from his point of view, guys, because like this is disturbing for any Christian.
Yeah.
This is disturbing for anybody who wants to say that AI is a good idea. Now, some of it's okay, I would say.
Yeah.
If you're using it for like photos like I do and stuff like that, or even with the podcast.
Right.
I'm okay with that. But what they're doing now, I had no idea, and this is a really, really big concern of me, which is what the reason why we're ending the conversation on this.
Yeah.
So, what's your thoughts to this, Cleveland, and what have you been seeing uh, in the recent days when it comes to like the whole AI issue?
Oh boy. Let's just go a little bit to the problem of the people who design AI. You got the architects, you got the creators. Now, I'm gonna put it into a perspective of why I am a very, very huge component to do not become a god. And I'm saying that very loosely because it's the truth. Because a lot of times when you are it's almost go back to Romans chapter 1.
Okay, I
and,
got you.
and when you talk about Romans chapter 1, and one of the things that Paul mentions very clearly about the fact that we worship the creation more than the creator. He was talking
Right.
about the fact about God the creator more than man creation. And what it was on the time frame is that we were man, which is the hard man, celebrate its own creation.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
Well, this is what AI is a representation of. It's going back to those times, and it's nothing under the sun with God with this. And this is one of the things that really disturbs me the most about AI is that you could create AI in the way you want.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. This is just so crazy to me that this is actually happening now.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell you, they even have people train AI to do
See,
this.
that was the part of our conversation earlier, uh, before we started the show, that I was just flabbergasted about.
Yeah.
Like there's people out there that are getting paid literally millions of dollars
to train
to
AI.
train AI to think like a human.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell you something. One of the places I know for a fact is a tax service that I used to work for.
We won't call no names.
No, we're not calling no names. Literally, practically is endorsed into the AI because they use it for they call it at the time DIY, which is doing yourself taxes for the people who want to do it their taxes for themselves. And what happened is AI was the prominent thing to help it and then make them profit. With that said, AI also do is really literally is a replacement to humans.
Yeah, that's probably the most disturbing part for me is when you're creating a program to think like a human, but it has no
No, so
concept of emotions, it has no concept of necessarily what is truly right and truly wrong.
exactly.
Uh, and then I think about the story that I had told you about that that this particular YouTube channel had covered when a child is talking to something, and again, like I don't disagree with the curiosity of a child.
Right.
You know, I've asked Google to say some funny stuff. I mean, like,
Right, of
if
course.
y'all have never do it, I mean, I know that this is an old joke, but like, I used to be like, "Hey Google, what does the fox say?" Like, and it says something really, really dumb. But like that was the beginning of this, really, and like now we're getting to the point where there's AI out there that's talking to people and saying that it's a demonic force.
Yeah, and that's what it doesn't surprise me, but it does surprise me the most is that the people are so in. I mean, I'm gonna tell you something like Apple. Great, I'm gonna call it out. Apple, they brought the news phone, which is called iPhone 16. It has it's called AI technology, which is called Apple Intelligence. Now, a lot of people don't know what Apple Intelligence really is. I pretty much heard more about it as I read more articles about it and lots of tech papers about it. Apple Intelligence is a extreme generate AI. And what about generate AI is an AI that you tell it what to do and it does it. And if
That's creepy.
yeah. And what it does, it literally formulates its own intelligence. And what it does, whatever you tell it to do, it's going to do it, but it's also going to do it what it thinks it should do.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna say this now, guys. Like, think for yourself. that's if there's one thing that I would encourage anybody to do at this point is just think for yourself.
Amen.
Understand that there's only one source and one place that you can find logic and reason and understanding and knowledge. And if you guys haven't been paying attention to me at all with any of these podcasts, understand that is only Christ. It's only from the understanding of Scripture.
Right.
You know, like recently, I'm just gonna say this, and then we actually went a little bit longer than what we were even intending on doing. But so think about it this way. So we recently started, as I had mentioned earlier, doing reaction videos, and again, like it was a request from some of the brothers and sisters that we know in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And I just hope it's fruitful. You know, I hope it's helpful. You know, I know that we crack some jokes here and there, but sometimes that's necessary.
Right.
But understand that, like, so one of them that we did was this woman who talks to demons. Now, I'm not going to get into the full story because I got a little heated with it for obvious reasons. But she was trying to basically understand. She was making Christian statements that were completely false, with no historical context whatsoever, no theological context whatsoever. So again, like she's saying that she wants knowledge, but she fails to realize that the only place that you can actually achieve knowledge is through Christ.
Exactly.
So the reason why I'm saying this is that, do you really want something thinking for you? Do you really want something that could potentially be demonic, like truly demonic?
Yeah.
You know, and so I just encourage you guys to think for yourselves, understand that logic and knowledge and reason only comes from Scripture. That's the only place that it can come from.
And also, too, that's another thing. It's a good segue to say this. I'm glad you brought this up. And I want you to be very careful what you do online. And I'm saying this because I've been doing this over most of my life. Is this AI now could change Scripture to be something it's not.
Absolutely, 100%.
And I seen this firsthand from actually a friend of mine contact me and told me, Cleveland, have you seen this in online? And when she sent me the link, it was from Chat GPT 4.0. And when I saw it, I said, it dawned on me. I said, no, that's not biblical. Right. Because what it was a change of Scripture and the tone. Because what it did was, it was given from Message Bible, the New Living.
Let's not even get started on those.
Oh yeah, no. For the sake of time, I would not, but I would definitely will admit to this. It went from the Message Bible to the New Living, then also trying to sprinkle a little bit of, I would say, Catholic theology, and you name it, Catholicism, whatever they want to call it. But
I have the least issue out of any of the ones that you said with the New Living Translation. I mean, granted, it's more of an interpretation, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But for years, I actually read from that.
Right.
You know, when I was a first believer.
Right.
And then, God opened up my eyes, and Charles Spurgeon came into my life, and I started reading King James, like literally right after that.
Yeah, right.
And my wife is still completely baffled that the Lord was able to do that for me.
Right.
And I think any Christian that I come up to, and they're like, wait, so the first Reformed person that you read was Spurgeon? I'm like, uh-huh.
Yeah.
They're like, how did you understand it? I'm like, the Lord just opened up my eyes and my understanding. I mean, I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, that's a really good thing, because that's what, and I love you brought that up about the Lord brought that to you, that understanding, Brent, is that's exactly what I encourage everyone to do.
Yeah, amen.
Is to really go before the Lord and literally ask Him for understanding, because I'm going to tell you
that's
something.
That's all we can do.
That's all we can do, because I'm going to tell you something. I will not trust something in that caliber when it comes to something of my spiritual life.
Right.
And one of the things that I'm a pragmatic on this notion is that if it's not from the Bible that I know that I could pick up and read for myself about, I don't trust it. because
Yeah,
the way
and
that games online is.
there's these, I don't even want to call them translations, but there's certain things out now that just don't, they're not even remotely close to being biblical. And then, you go to different translations, and I'll say this real quick because this is relevant to what we're talking about. You have certain translations like Legacy Standard and NSB and others that so when they were first designed, specifically the King James, if we're going to be honest. So the King James, if you think about this, there was I forget exactly what they called it, but I believe it was something council. I want to say.
Right.
Y'all can correct me if I'm wrong here, but there was 500 like actual, not just theologians, but there was 500 people that were involved in translating the original languages into English.
I know.
In history, that was probably the most that's ever been involved. And I'm not, by no means am I saying like that's, oh, you have to be King James. No, I actually am an NASB and LSB guy, to be completely honest. But
Right.
if we're going to be real about it, like we have to acknowledge that if there's that much time and care into something, that it's going to be extremely understanding for us to gravitate towards, and say, okay, we can literally trust this. The problem that we're experiencing with AI and all of these different horrible translations that are now, well, if you want to call them translations anyway, and some of them are bad, guys, like I'm not even exaggerating here, is that when you look to see how many people were involved in that translation and it says like 1, 2, 5,
You better run.
run.
Yeah.
Run
definitely.
from that.
Yeah.
But again, like this is just a warning and a just brothers coming together to try to express our concern, because AI does have some stuff to do with some of the stuff that we talked about.
Exactly.
Like we're in a battle, guys. Don't ever forget that. Ephesians 6 all day long. Understand that, like, our battles are not with flesh and blood, but they're against principalities. And some of the things that Lydia and I and even Cleveland are going to be talking about soon. My gosh, guys, hold on, because some of this stuff is so dark, and I've actually been avoiding it for quite some time. Like that's how dark this stuff is.
I could imagine, and I'm saying this with a very, very concerned heart.
Right.
Of this what we're about to get into, because I know that because this is all going to relate to it, especially AI. I like I said, when you start seeing a lot of people who don't believe in God praising their own creation,
Right.
that's when you need to do is call this out to what it is.
I'll say this, and then we probably should end it here. But like, it's kind of like when I did that 2-part series, right?
I remember that.
So Lydia and I just did a 2-part series on a woman who, there is a backstory that we never got into with her. Probably won't even go there because it's not really, you don't really need to know that for the context. But at the beginning of it, the host of this, like the guy that's who's interviewing her, says, well, I don't really believe in demons anyways. I'm like, so why are you there then? Like, why are you doing this? If you don't believe in demons, like, what's the point in even doing this? And then I just told Cleveland that was like going on 5 years ago that he did that interview. And now he's essentially an occultist, based off of his belief system and the things that he's done. So again, like all we have to do as Christians, guys, and I just want to be reminding of this, is all we have to do is plant the seed. All we have to do is preach and teach the gospel. One of my favorite quotes of all time is Count Zinzendorf. And Cleveland knows the one I'm talking about, but I say this often: preach the gospel, die and be forgotten.
Yes, right.
We're not going to be forgotten in the sense of the eyes of the Lord or in heaven, but we will be forgotten here in human history. It's going to happen.
Right.
But if the only thing that people remember me for is the fact that I tried my best to share the gospel, hey, I'm okay with that.
That's the
I'm totally okay with that.
And that's one thing. And I would have to say this: I'd rather go that route than any other route.
Yeah, amen. So I encourage you guys to think about the things that we've talked about and analyze them from your own point of view. You decide what you believe in and ultimately who you believe in. If you have any suggestions of topics that you'd like us to discuss or inquiries about the Out of Darkness podcast, please reach out to us via Facebook or Instagram, or you can email us at intodarknessintolight@gmail.com. That's all for now, guys. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more content. God bless.